So, welcome back to Working Class Music. My name is Tia, one of your hosts, and today we are joined by a special guest.
Hey, my name is Carla James. I am a drummer in the greater Atlanta music DIY scene. I play in a band called In Memories, and I play in a new band called Beltway, which is very sassy, hard-hitting hardcore.
So, as far as your other bands, where can we find your music?
In Memories has a Bandcamp. Beltway does not have a Bandcamp just yet, but you can follow us on Instagram at the band Beltway.
I want to hear from some of the experiences that you've had, just being, a female musician. How has that affected the way that people perceive you, or have you noticed a difference in the way that people kind of treated you just overall?
Yeah, totally. I've been involved in some capacity in this music scene for well over a decade, and I've been out as trans publicly for 2 years. So I've had, the bulk of my music career actually pre-transition. I've been out queer essentially the whole time, but definitely seeing the change, especially playing live from pre-transition to now, it's been really interesting. I get a lot less gear talk. So that's probably the biggest. I still have the same amount of people coming to talk to me at shows, but I get significantly less what size kick drum is that? Or what cymbals are you using? I get a lot more of oh, that was awesome kind of thing. Okay, so a lot more generalized oh, you are so much fun to watch. This is so cool. And very little because I'm kind of bad about punishing people as far as gear talk. I love talking about gear. It's been my constant obsession. So I'm always down to talk about it. And I feel like a lot of people aren't super ready. When they come up to ask questions, they weren't ready for me to unload a whole spec sheet.
Yeah, you're ready to nerd out, and they're just oh shit, I was pretty surface level with this.
Yeah, it's been a lot of that. It has been kind of interesting seeing the difference between more recently, a lot of girls at shows will come up and I get that nice experience of them kind of just being hey, it was really cool seeing a girl up on stage. It really it's right here. It's so nice. I feel so happy, and I feel not only so accepted, but just in general just I'm happy to be visible, because I remember growing up, there were very few trans women or just women in general that I saw doing the kind of genres that I play, because I play a lot of punk and metal. So there is, a few people here and there, Amy Lee from Evanescence to go way back.
Yeah.
The gal from Arch Enemy. So there were a bunch of metal bands that had women in some capacity, but it was overwhelmingly just straight white dudes.
Yeah.
Straight white dudes, power chords, chugging stuff like that. And so I've seen a lot more of that change over the years, and it's been really satisfying to now be kind of a part of that.
Yeah.
People in the audience are seeing me, and they see themselves somehow kind of represented in me in some form, and that's really satisfying. I feel really good about it.
Representation is important because it's a lot easier to inspire kind of those girls to kind of take that leap and to actually try to pursue it themselves, rather than thinking, I don't look, like you said. I used to go to a lot of metal shows. I love Whitechapel. I've seen Suicide Silence, and the crowd was overwhelmingly white and male.
It's a lot of that. It's real musty.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right, let's kill some time. I'm gonna just hop in here. I don't make cameos on this show very often. All right, well, I'm gonna let Tia get back.
Can we keep that in the video?
So a lot of the metal scene, it is very much big macho kind of guys, especially with that whole race to the lowest possible tuning.
Oh yeah.
Since now we're way past a whole octave down.
Yeah.
Just so wild.
Yeah, at a certain point, it's you should just maybe have all bass players.
You should. Because of the machismo in metal, it's been kind of interesting to see that there's not as many women, and that's changing a lot.
Yeah.
Props to the hardcore scene for really empowering women to do that.
Yeah.
And to see more female, and just honestly anybody that isn't white. That's been really fucking cool. One of my all-time favorite bands is Jesus Piece.
Okay.
They are so fucking cool. Seeing
some color.
Seeing some color in hardcore. There's always been Bad Brains, there's always been bands like that, but it's now coming more into vogue. I'm seeing a lot less just all white lineups.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I feel like that was kind of a reason why I stopped going to those types of shows, is because like I didn't feel super comfortable.
Yeah,
I'm 5'2", barely 120 pounds, and I was easily thrown around. I got hurt a couple times, left with bruises. I know it's part of the mentality of like, don't go to a show if you don't want to get thrown around. It's just like, okay, but I kind of just like want to enjoy this. Like I get that pits are going, but I'm not in the pit.
yeah. Well, and that like comes from that weird era of like the crowd killing stuff.
Yeah.
I remember seeing that start to pop up, and like I wasn't super active going to shows at that time. I had kind of stepped back. I wasn't out of music, but the band that I was in had broken up, and I was still like not really in a band just yet. But I remember seeing that like the beatdown bands like start to come up, and like started to really like see that happening. And I don't know, it just sucks. It really doesn't feel inviting.
From your point of view, like as a trans woman, do you feel safe and comfortable going to these types of shows, or is that something you tend to avoid?
It's something that like I didn't really think too much about at the time when I came out, but it was definitely something that I started to see as I started like going to shows. And like I remember having moments where I was like getting ready and basically changing out of the outfit that I set up, because I was like, I don't feel super comfortable representing as femme as I am going to this one show. And it's not necessarily that like anybody would have given me shit, because I've been lucky enough to not really have that experience. But there have been times, and there's been uncomfortable moments at shows. But for the most part, my band thankfully is super nice about just like kind of
rescuing you.
Yeah, they kind of just they keep after me. They make sure that I'm staying out of trouble. And so like that's really helped. And the community kind of sticks up for everybody.
So even, I guess in like your day-to-day life, do you still feel that same level of comfort if you're like out with like your partner or things like that? Like if you go to a bar or even to like a new friend's house, do you still feel like welcomed and safe?
I do now. I definitely do now. I have a lot more passing privilege. Like the longer I've been on HRT and like I'm more comfortable in my skin, I definitely feel better. But I've been traveling a lot more, and there's been moments like you'll be in like rural Florida, and there'll be moments of like, should I go to the women's restroom in this gas station, or like what should I do? So traveling, even just like as like a cis woman, just in general, you have to think over your actions a lot more. You have to think over like what you're doing, and it's like, am I vulnerable in this position?
I don't know if you've always had that thought in the back of your mind, like even before transitioning, or you have to take into account like when traveling things like a sundown town, like
it definitely puts cis male white privilege into perspective. Just like, I'm not that. I can't just like walk down the street at night. Like it's actually dangerous. Like I've lived in the South my entire life. It was always something I was aware of in the back of my head, but I don't think I really understood it until after I started presenting femme in public.
Until you started living it, I guess.
You get hyper aware of it.
So I want to talk about, like, when was that moment in your mind where you finally came to peace and said out loud, not only to yourself, but maybe to your friends and family, like, okay, I am trans?
Oh, yeah. That's actually, it's a pretty good story for me specifically, just because I tried when I was 23 to come out. I was living in Cobb County. I had that moment. I'd always kind of had gender identity issues kind of going through, and in hindsight, it was glaringly obvious. But like when I finally had the moment where I was like, oh shit, like maybe like this isn't just I feel weird in my body. Maybe this is because I'm a woman. I mean, I had that moment, and I came out to my partner at the time, and I didn't really do much after that. It suddenly became completely overwhelming because the amount of resources back then, it just wasn't there. And like I had no idea, like my life wasn't together. I was like working at like a shitty minimum wage job. And so what I ended up doing is I started using my initials. I stopped using my dead name. I took like some steps, but then I ended up kind of going back in the closet for a while. And it wasn't until I was like 27, it was Christmas Eve, and I was at my like then partner's parents' house. And I remember just kind of like sitting in the bathroom and just like staring at myself in the mirror. And I had this moment where I was just like, holy shit, like I need to transition or I'm not gonna make it.
That's actually something I've heard from pretty much all of my trans friends when we've had a conversation. It's just like, my best friend in particular, she told me, she's like, honestly, like if I didn't come out, I would have killed myself.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine like what that must feel like to just literally just feel trapped.
Oh yeah, it's so like, it was so scary, like, because I think every trans person has this moment. They first realize, and they like nobody knows, it's just them who knows, and it's such a weird moment of just like what do I do?
how was it coming out to like your friends and like your band members? How did they take it?
I had actually just been like sort of kicked out / quit a band right before I came out, like made my huge like coming out post and everything. I had started on hormones, and that was like part of the reason why I was like not attentive and like led to the ultimate demise of the band. So because of that, I actually kind of came out and then pretty immediately joined In Memories. But that was still like a moment where I didn't have the experience of like coming out to a band that I was currently in. So I kind of just got to start off with a brand new project, completely clean. But I will say that like coming out to friends was like really interesting, because I got kind of the full spectrum of just like people being like, oh yeah, we always knew, oh yeah, you massive egg kind of thing. And then there were definitely people who were like, oh, I would have never guessed, you like never struck me as that. Or it's like, oh, you were so like adamantly like super masculine. I like to think that most people kind of stuck it out. I didn't really have anybody immediately be like, oh, like we can't be friends because you're trans.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you had a like I said earlier, a solid support system, like a really good group of people that you could, you know, be comfortable, and they can still be comfortable, you know, just with everything. And that's awesome. I feel like not everybody has that, especially not every trans person has that.
No, especially not. I was lucky enough to already be involved with music. A lot of trans people, unfortunately, have to form a new social circle the moment they come out, and a lot of them don't have a lot of experience being social before that, because like dysphoria has a really, you know, is very strong way of just isolating you. So a lot of them like didn't have that experience of like having friends.
So do you have any advice for maybe some younger, or not even younger, but just for people who are just now coming to that realization for themselves?
It gets easier. I promise it gets easier. The biggest advice that I can give any trans person is just like be gentle. Just be really gentle with yourself, especially like when you first come out, because it's overwhelming, the amount of things, and you can really only do so much at a time. It's a slow process, and like I promise, like I can tell you, with each passing year I have more good days than I have bad days.
That's good. So that's
it
good.
gets easier.
Sweet. So also with that, overall, do you feel more confident now than you did, you know, a couple years back?
Oh, absolutely. I'm very outgoing. I used to pretty much not hang out with anybody. I was very, very isolated. I spent a lot of time just playing video games, working on music, not really doing much. But like over the years, as I've gotten more comfortable with myself, it's been way easier. I like going out. I like being around people.
So it feels as if like a weight has been lifted and you can finally live your life.
Exactly.
Like, to the fullest, like how you want, how you envision it. That's awesome.
Props to the Metro Atlanta DIY scene. They were super welcoming, and pretty much everybody like was instantly, they just picked up on it. I've had very little issues. I remember just overwhelming support, and there were so many people that were just like, they picked it up instantly, and it's nice. It was really welcoming.
It's awesome. Do you want to come back around? I guess talk more about music?
Yeah, absolutely.
What made you want to start playing drums? Like, what were your biggest like influences?
Oh, this is actually a really like cute and like kind of goofy story. So I originally I wanted to play guitar really bad. I think that's a lot of people's experience. It's like, oh shit, like guitar looks so cool. And like I got a guitar, my stepdad got me one for Christmas, and like I was immediately terrible. And like I felt so like defeated. But at the time I had been playing percussion in like middle school band. I like started doing that because my friends were doing it, and I couldn't make a sound on the saxophone reed. So I was like, well, I don't want to play clarinet. So like I started doing that, and because I already like knew drums, I had this weird epiphany when I was watching School of Rock.
Yes.
Yep. And seeing that like kid just play drums and being like, oh wait, I can do this.
That's an option.
Like, I remember pestering my parents and be like, hey, like I know you got me a guitar and I like didn't stick with it, but like maybe drums, maybe. And then they got me a drum set like the next year, and it was like downhill ever since. I just like I took to it. I loved it. I've tried since to play other instruments, and just drums are my main one.
When it comes to like putting music together for your band, what role do you play?
So over the years, I've gotten a lot better about providing more like feedback on the actual song itself. Mm-hmm. For a while, I was just like, well, I only really know how to play drums. All of my things that I can do are drum related. And so like as I've gotten more like into audio engineering and just music in general, I've felt a lot more confident in like speaking my ideas as far as that goes. But I still am very much, because I only play drums, I have to be like, all right, well, what riffs you got? So it's a lot of like writing things that like to riffs that people already have and helping build off that way. I will say I'm a lot more comfortable with my playing style. I know like I'm not trying to be super flashy anymore. That was definitely something I like wanted when I was a lot younger. Just like how many fills can I put in this song? Like how like exaggerated and crazy can I make this this drum beat?
Yeah.
And now I'm a lot more like playing for this song. I'd rather play like easy, simple stuff that hits hard than trying to like pack as many notes as I can into a measure.
Okay, like you're playing with a bit more emotion, like you're making it more deliberate rather than just, like you said, being flashy and just kind of showing off.
Yeah, I got really big into practicing making sure that each hit was very consistent. I get a lot of compliments about it, actually. It was just like, oh, you hit that snare drum so hard. And I was like, yeah, I was like bound and determined to be able to like just hit consistently. I think it was my first semester in college. I was taking Recording 101, and I like came in with my drums and we were practicing miking up drum sets and doing all that. And I remember my teacher coming back and just being like, everything was really good, really solid, a couple critiques. Hit that snare drum harder. And like for whatever reason that stuck with me, and like Professor Wade, thank you so much for making me a better drummer. But now I like slam those things. Like nearly every like major hit is going to be rim shot. It's going to be loud. So like
I'm starting. Needs a break.
Pretty much all the stuff that I've touched since coming out, I feel a lot better about it. With music now, I know that's what I want to do, because there was definitely a period of time where I was just kind of lost. I didn't know if like music was like a thing I should like focus on, like getting a career, like going back to school. And like I did go back to school, but I realized like while I was going back to school, it's like, oh, I really want to be in music. And like I've kind of shaped the rest of like my life decisions from that. Like I started a job that gave me a lot more freedom so that I can play shows and I can tour, and like it's made me want to be in a band a lot more.
I kind of want to talk about like the kind of job thing and kind of like your, I guess, day-to-day life. Like, did you feel any type of anxiety like like applying for places and like wondering and kind of hoping that they don't discriminate?
Oh, I definitely did. I work in the animal care industry. I'm a dog groomer right now. Thankfully, like that industry is generally pretty queer, or at least like very like female centric. But I do remember, because I was applying for jobs at the time, because I was working as a dog walker and I was like 1099 and like not making any money, and it was like I watched my business start to like decline. So I immediately started like searching for jobs, and I remember like sitting there in the interview and like talking to the hiring manager and just like straight up just being like, hey, like I had made it all the way through the interview and like things were going really, really well, and I was at the very end, I was like, hey, like just so you know, it's like I'm trans, like I use she, her, I go by this. I put it out there and it was just like instantly like, does this go okay? And then it was like the guy who was doing my interviews, and it was very much like, yeah, that's fine. And like I've talked to a lot of girls who like that's one of the big issues that pertains to coming out. It was just like, how do I come out to my job?
Yeah, that can definitely be a bit of an awkward thing to navigate, because it's just like, who is going to be okay with this and who's not? And then even on top of that, with Georgia being like an at-will, you know,
the right to work thing is scary.
Yeah, that is terrifying for any reason. They don't even need a reason. They could literally just wake up and just be like, yeah, off the schedule. We'll find a replacement.
Yeah, exactly. And so like that anxiety is definitely there. So there was definitely a lot of moments, especially with new people too, having that awkward moment of like, hey, like just so you know. So I would always do this thing, because I would constantly be like helping train people. And I remember like the moment I was in there and like had just some time with them, I would always be like, hey, so like what are your pronouns? I use she, her kind of thing, to like basically just like ease them in a little bit. It was like, hey, like I'm trans kind of thing.
It's one of those things, like I feel like repeated exposure and really just like education goes a very, very long way.
Oh yeah.
Like interacting with people of like a different background, whether they're from a different country, different religion, education, and even just having a conversation with someone is the easiest way to just kind of get to learn some new things.
Yeah. And you're going to get these questions. You're just going to get dumb questions sometime, and they don't mean it to be offensive. They just literally have never experienced that.
What's the dumbest question you've heard?
Okay, so the dumbest question that I've heard, which, like, I understand her reasoning, but she basically just asked, is like, hey, do you have to, like, go to the gynecologist? And I was like, no, I go to an endocrinologist for my hormones. I don't have to go to the gyno. So it was, like, just very weird. It was like, I understand where you're coming from, because, like, that's where you deal with hormones, but that's not what I have to deal with.
Different specialty.
It is, yeah, it is. So I did a lot of that.
See, I even feel like a question like that, like, ignorant, yeah. But, you know, at the end of the day, like, you're helping her learn.
Yeah.
You know?
It's very rarely is, like, somebody being transphobic in that moment. They just literally don't know.
How do you feel about, I guess, mental health in general? Like, do you feel like when you were transitioning and coming out, were you also talking to a therapist before you got on hormones, after, or kind of during the entire process? How'd that go?
Okay, so when I actually did get on hormones, I was already seeing a counselor. For Georgia, you do actually, a lot of places you'll need that therapist letter to get on hormones. Thankfully, the place that I went through didn't require that, but I didn't know that going into it. I just was already like, all right, well, this is something I know that I have to do. So I got like a therapist and like got my letter from her. That was a big deal. But when I first like started having these like feelings when I was 23, I didn't have a therapist. I basically just kind of like let everything mull around and tried to deal with it myself. And honestly, with how overwhelming it is, get somebody who's like a third party, like talk to somebody about it. I do suggest that with mental health and like going to seek counseling or therapy, my biggest advice with that is to pick a therapist that's going to help with one problem specifically. Like try to break it down. You can't just be like, oh, like I'm depressed, I need to work on this. If you go to somebody who specializes in something that you're trying to do, like in my case, I went to a therapist that specializes in like gender stuff, like gender identity issues and transition related like therapy. So I picked that out as like, this is the big thing that I want to work on.
Yeah, you kind of prioritize and you're like, okay, what's the biggest task on this list?
Just start on one thing at a time, because if you try to work on 5 issues at once, you're not going to be able to do it.
Yeah, it's very easy to stretch yourself thin. So even now, are you still speaking with a therapist?
Currently I'm not, but I am seeking to get back into it. I understand that it's like expensive, and especially like if you can luck out and find somebody who's sliding scale or your insurance can pay for it, definitely go for it. But like therapy right now is kind of out of the reach of a lot of people.
It seems really difficult to kind of get out of that cycle, but kind of how you said earlier, like it does get better. It's just one of those things you have to hold on, keep hoping for the best, and keep pursuing things forward.
Yeah.
So kind of lighten the mood a little bit. What is the first thing you want to do, I guess, post-COVID?
Oh my God, I just want to go to a show. I don't care what bands are playing. I don't know what bands will play or what venue it's going to be at. The moment there's a show that like is safe, that isn't just like, oh, it's socially distanced. And it's like,
It's going to be outside.
Yeah, everything's so far up in the air. Because there's no pressure to have shows or anything, I think it's been a lot better for a lot of bands. It's like, I've got to like write with Beltway, like we got to make this project. And with like In Memories, it's just like everybody's focusing on our lives right now. There's not as much pressure. Because one of our big issues was we just played shows constantly. It was really hard for us to start working on a full length because we were always just like, well, we have to practice for this show. And so because of that, like we've had a lot more time to sit on riffs and work on stuff. I will say it's been interesting to kind of see there's bands that have lived their entire life cycle in COVID that are like, they got made, they've released a record, they're broken up now. Like it's crazy. No shows. Like just these bands that like nobody's ever heard of.
Yeah, they just like literally just burnt out as soon as the fire was lit.
Well, because like I don't think anybody was prepared for COVID to be as long as it is.
No,
and everybody was like, oh, it'll only be like 6 months. We'll have like a whole record ready to go, and we'll play these, like we'll go on tour, we'll do all this, and then it's like, you know, 7 months, 9 months, a whole year. Everybody's like, well, I guess like fuck this. I'm excited for music to come back. I'm excited to see what DIY spaces grow to fill like the voids of all the places that we've lost.
Yeah, I mean the first one that comes to mind is like the bakery.
Bakery was a big one.
Dude, I loved.
That was the big one.
Yeah.
And like I'm thankful that I got to play one of the last shows there. And it was like right at that time we were like, is this show still gonna happen? I remember like day of, like we were texting in the group chat and it was like, they haven't, like Daniel didn't cancel it, so like it's still good. And like the next day everything started locking down.
You got in like right when it mattered.
Like, all right, well, hell yeah, we got it. So I remember coming there on like one of the last days. It was just sad talking to everybody involved and just being like, wow, there goes like one of the bigger spaces for DIY.
Especially like a queer friendly like place.
Yeah.
Like,
and I always knew that no matter what, like bad stuff wasn't going to happen there because everybody was like, nobody was going to let that happen.
Were there any specific bands or a specific drummer that like really just made you want to play? Like middle school you, where you're just like, that, yes.
Oh, definitely. I was huge into Mastodon. Braun is just like...
They want me to make a drumstick sandwich. I don't think that these are edible, but, you know, whatever.
Such like a phenomenal drummer, and that was like, damn, I set that bar real high. And then I was like really into like Chris Adler from Lamb of God was like one of the big ones, Dave Lombardo, like classic Slayer. And it wasn't until like later on in life that I started to like get into more like really like just kind of crazy, a lot more like polyrhythms. So that's kind of where I fell. Like, I started out with like crazy jazz drumming, and then just went to just caveman drums, and then now I'm back to like a nice balance between the two. And like that's kind of where my style is now, where like I'll do some crazier fills here and there, but for the most part I'm just like, I want to play to the song. I just want to play consistently. Benny Greb put it the best way, where it's like drumming is a language, and like you can be very, very wordy sometimes, but you end up not saying a lot. So just get straight to the point.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Oh, it's so easy to overdo it. You can be flashy all day, but like you're still just doing paradiddles.
So yeah, I think that's a pretty good note to end on. We enjoyed having you. Again, just for the people who may have forgotten, you know, from point A to point B, where can we find you? Your bands, where can we find their music?
So you can find In Memories on Bandcamp, inmemories.bandcamp.com. You can find Beltway on Instagram at the band Beltway. And then you can also just follow me on Instagram. I'm dis.waifu. So.
All right, well, I'm Tia. This has been Working Class Music, and we'll see you next time. I don't know.
We'll see. Yeah.